Hey, this is Conor Daly, driver of the number 76 Juncos Hollinger Racing Chevrolet, and you're listening to the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast.
Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, and for the 100th episode, we are joined by a fellow podcaster who does a bit of racing on the side, the driver of number 76 Juncos Hollinger Racing Chevrolet. It's none other than Conor Daly. Conor, welcome to the show. It's a privilege to have you on.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So just come back off St. Petersburg, obviously the opening round of the season. So how would you reflect on the weekend?
Well, I mean, honestly, just good to get going again. So much happened, I feel like, over the weekend. There's obviously, I think for us, just a couple small errors. And really, it just goes to show you how, again, once, so competitive this series. We're fast in both practices, and then you just have one small error in qualifying to miss the optimal lap on the tires. And, like Pato, you're in the back, and that's just what it takes. So the Reds lasted one lap, and if you didn't nail the tire pressure window for that lap, then you had no chance. So it doesn't matter who you are. So it's kind of a shame. And then obviously the new tire allotment rules caught us out as well. With the heavier car and sometimes you could use used primaries in the past. Now that's definitely not the case, as we found out in our second stint. So just two small things that, we had a very mistake-free race, good start, got ourselves in a position to be in the top 12. We just had one bad end of a stint. So I think honestly, there's a lot for us to be excited about, because it's a first weekend together as a lot of new people together in our group, and we had some decent pace kind of throughout the weekend and the race. So I'm not upset about it, but obviously every point counts, and so you can't have too many of those weekends. As Colton Herta knows, like both of us were back there, like we can't have that again. So we gotta keep going.
So, yeah, just when you kind of reflected on the time you had with Juncos Hollinger Racing at the back end of last year, obviously, you did your time with them in the junior series, and this was kind of, I guess, V2 of your time with Juncos. You crucially got them into the leaders circle. Did you at the time kind of think this could blossom into a full-time opportunity? Was that something that was kind of always at the back of your mind when you initially had that opportunity at the back end of last year?
That's what I wanted. Yeah, that's what I wanted. I knew that they hadn't had their driver lineup set, when I got into the car at the end of last year. I know I still have a lot that I want to do in the IndyCar series that I probably haven't had a chance to do yet. So yeah, but I also knew that I don't necessarily come with a large Rolodex of funding behind me, and then I knew they needed that too. So there was a lot that went into it, but all I could do is do the best job possible. And I think obviously getting us on the podium is the only reason why I got the drive. So, every race I thought we had a chance to compete. St. Louis, we were wrecked, but still did well. Portland, we got wrecked twice, but showed a lot more pace in that race than I think was you had to dive a little bit deep into that one to really discover what we were doing there. But yeah, all the ovals, we were good. Nashville, we qualified up front. We ran in the top 10 again. So I think all of what I was able to do with that short amount of time is the only reason why I'm here now. And I think Brad and Ricardo want to win, especially with Dave O'Neill there as well as in the team manager role. So yeah, there's a lot that, we still want to do together for sure, but it just would have felt just sad had we not continued with the momentum that we had at the end of last year. Everything was kind of going this way, and you're like, well, we don't want to stop this. It's going up. And I felt like I proved to them that like I have a lot I want to do here, and I want to be able to be successful in this series, and I think I can be. So let's go.
And I guess just digging into that, once Nashville was concluded last year, what was the process beyond that? When did things kind of start rolling in terms of getting this full-time ride for this year? And, I guess just how early on in the off-season did you get an indication that, okay, right, this is a possibility?
That's a really tough question. It's every week I was trying to do something to solidify the opportunity. But I knew that there was a funding element that needed to be in place, and I knew that there was some people out there with funding. So it was just trying to fight off those that were around, but also try to continue to solidify, my position within the team from a, financial support standpoint. So there's a lot that, if it were only about just picking drivers, it'd be much easier. But sadly, that's not the case. There has to be a whole business element involved. A lot of the times, some drivers obviously can just be selected, and there is some folks that get to benefit from that. But I am not one of those yet. I still have to kind of create opportunities for myself, and certainly my driving did, I think, secure this by last year, so that's helpful. But we are obviously still trying to build partnerships into this team so we can continue to further solidify, the fact that I want to be here for not only this year, but for more years into the future as well.
And I guess just following up on that, there had been sort of a few questions in recent weeks about your position after your key sponsor dropped out. I know sort of just before St. Petersburg, you got 76 on board with the team. So how are things now looking from a financial side of things? Does that give you a bit more security than you had previously?
I mean, there's a lot that I think can be said publicly, and a lot that can't be. So, we're still here. We're still fighting the good fight every day. I live life one day at a time, one weekend at a time, because that's how I realize that IndyCar has to be nowadays. So, I mean, I'm with the team. We want to win together. We want to fight for this championship throughout the weekends, all the way to the end of it. But obviously, we still want to, make it known to people that, like, hey, there are opportunities here to support us, and that will help us if people continue to come on board.
So coming into St. Pete, sort of how late notice was the deal? Because obviously you changed number quite late on into the weekend. So was that sort of a last minute thing before St. Pete?
It was still happening Friday before the practice. So yeah, it was very, very last minute. And that deal sort of still has to grow and evolve as we go through the weeks here headed to Thermal. So it was kind of one of those things where racing is just so silly sometimes, and everything is for sale at all times. So you just have to move forward like that. And we have we got a little bit of a deal in place, a little bit of funding in place, but it definitely isn't life-changing funding. So we'll have to kind of continue as we do day by day. But yeah, it was nice to get a little bit of something and a little bit of PR, and it was a cool looking number for sure with the logo. Everyone recognizes it. So yeah, again, day by day, we're just doing it day by day. Everything's for sale at all times.
I know we've spoken a lot to drivers about kind of that business side of the sport, that people almost don't realize that is a skill that drivers in this modern age need to have, as well as being a good driver. So I guess, can you just expand a little bit on, how important it is for you to be quite astute off track, and just how much work you personally as the driver actually have to put in, and that kind of skill set as well?
Well, it just depends on if you're willing to, put your ego aside to continue to fight for your own opportunities. I think there are plenty of times where I could have just been like, nah, this is stupid. Like I know what I can do, but I'm never going to get a chance to prove it. And I could continue talking about it for the next 60 years of my life. Well, I don't want to do that. Like I know that, I've got plenty of trophies behind me from the NTT IndyCar series. Like I think that there's things that I want to continue to do in this series. So, it's a matter of putting your own self to work to continue to create a chance to compete at the highest level in the sport. And I love doing it. Like, this is what I love to do. And it's certainly not what's, making me tons of money and creating a giant celebrity. Like that's crazy. Like I just want to get in there and compete. And a lot of it has been done in a, just a grind format. And that's what I've got right now. So it's hard, but I tell drivers all the time, I tell young drivers all the time, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes, because there's only 27 spots full time. And there's a lot of us out here who want to be in it, and you cannot just wait for an opportunity to be put in front of you. It's just never going to happen unless you're the next coming of Ayrton Senna. You know what I mean? You're going to get your chance if you're that guy, of course, like you are. But even still, I'd rather create an opportunity for myself than not.
Yeah, and we'd just like to, I guess, go a bit further back and reflect on, I guess, what's been quite a turbulent year or two for you between, obviously, your last full-time ride at Ed Carpenter Racing and now this full-time ride with Juncos. So I guess going back to 2023 when you lost that drive at ECR, what was going through your head? You know, at that point, did you think this might be the end of my IndyCar career?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's something that I never really expected. But honestly, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I think for sure. And maybe to Rinus too. I mean, Rinus just goes out there and kicks the crap out of him in the first race again. I mean, it's one of those things that I think is super satisfying to see for me. I sat next to Rinus. Rinus, I thought, was a great teammate because he was so talented. And I truly believe he was unfairly, let go there. But probably the best thing that could have happened to him, because again, gets right out the gate with a team that realistically was at the lowest end last year, and goes out there and does the job. So it's cool to see for him. But yeah, I mean, again, as soon as I leave that operation, we're on the podium, we're in the top 10, we're qualifying at the front. I mean, it's sometimes you need that in your life, and a lot of drivers don't get that chance to kind of go back and compete somewhere else in a better environment, or certainly a more fitting environment for yourself as a driver. So yeah, it was a tough moment, but definitely the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
I actually just wanted to follow up a bit on Rinus now that you've mentioned him, because listeners of this podcast will know that I think he is a really, really top driver and probably needs that different environment to just showcase that almost. So what was he like as a teammate? And what do you believe his ceiling and potential is as a driver?
Well, I mean, I think he's just a raw talent. I think he's got a lot to learn still about, certain things in the sport, but a raw talent that is truly just, a skilled IndyCar driver, right? A skilled driver in general, and will get the most out of the car no matter what it is. So I think that's pretty impressive. I don't know what his ceiling is, honestly, because he went from, being a well-paid IndyCar driver, winning a race, which is what you want to do. But, you're also only as good as your last race. So he started falling off that spectrum of like, this is the guy, you know what I mean? And you often don't get a chance to come back to the top end of that spectrum. So I hope that he does get that chance. This is an opportunity now in this year where he's going to be grinding. There's going to be moments where it's going to be like, yikes, this is still a situation where it is Dale Coyne Racing, and they've got a lot that they still want to do. And I know Dale, he's a great guy, great operation. He wants to give those drivers a chance to compete. So he's going to have to go through some tough moments, but I think he understands that. And I think him starting out the way he did just reminds you again that, like, hey, this might be the guy. Like if he drove for Penske, what is the ceiling? You know what I mean? If he drove for Ganassi, what are the opportunities there? I don't know if he's ever going to get that chance. I certainly don't know if I'll ever get that chance, but everyone will have those questions in their head that what if, but we're here now. We're both in the sport, and we both want to create more and more opportunities for ourselves.
In these sort of couple of uncertain years you've talked about, we've seen you sort of dabbling in and around NASCAR as sort of the racing you've done. So I guess what was the decision behind those races, and sort of how have you enjoyed the racing style, particularly compared to IndyCar?
Well, I mean, honestly, it was only about kind of taking advantage of the opportunities that were presented to me. I mean, I can't necessarily pick and choose what I want to do. I kind of just have to take advantage of what's an opportunity that's presented to me. And last year we were able to create some opportunities with the funding that we had from Polka Dot. And still to this day, one of the most fun events that I've ever done in my life is the Xfinity race that I did at Indy last year. So that was something that I will forever remember because of just how enjoyable it was, to run at the front of something that I had no business being at the front of yet, because I didn't know anything about the racing, didn't know anything about the cars, essentially didn't know much about the series, and hadn't competed on an oval really of that size in that series. Well, actually hadn't competed in an oval at all in that series. So, I'm really proud of that race, and it probably won't necessarily be, hung in the rafters anywhere, but it was really, really cool. And some of those opportunities in both the truck series, the Xfinity series, I learned a lot from that. And I think I'm a better oval driver for sure in the IndyCar stuff than I ever would have been if I didn't get those opportunities. So you learn something from everything you drive.
And I think it's been said in a few places that you were pursuing potentially full-time options in Xfinity for this year. So was IndyCar always your priority? And again, it was just a case of you looking for other opportunities, or had you even given up on looking for IndyCar options?
Well, I mean, IndyCar is hard to sell. I mean, it certainly was hard to sell. And obviously with Fox doing what they're doing now and the ratings that we see after race one, we hope that it becomes less hard to sell. And yeah, I didn't know what my chances were in IndyCar. Really, I had no idea. But I knew that if I could get a fresh start on the NASCAR side, anything's possible, right? If you get a good chance with a good team over there, certainly, you have an opportunity to start a long career. AJ Allmendinger did it. Several open wheel drivers did it before. It's just about getting in with the right opportunity at the right time with the right funding behind you. And so, no one's going to go hire me to start a new chapter in my career. It's never going to happen, unless I go out and win the Indy 500 this year or win a bunch of races this year. It's just not realistic. I'm sorry. They're hopes and dreams. You can't go racing on hopes and dreams. Like, yeah, well, this guy might be good in NASCAR. Like, no one knows that yet. Like, yeah, when I got in the Xfinity car, it went really well. And the team would have loved to have had me back if I had $4.5 million. So like, it's one of those things that, you still got to be raw and realistic about it. But yeah, we were certainly focused on trying to shift over to NASCAR, but I love IndyCar and I got a chance to be an IndyCar driver again with a team that I had success with. So you can never be upset about that.
And in these last couple of years, there has been the uncertainty of the IndyCar side. Let's hope that's now a thing of the past, obviously now with IndyCar. But how did you sort of find that super sub role? I guess it's obviously frustrating not having that opportunity, but at the same time, people are putting your trust in you to deliver results, which you did on most occasions.
I mean, I think it's definitely something that I don't want to be. You don't want to be the guy that has to step in last minute, least preparation, least amount of ability to succeed because everyone else has been on the simulator. They've been in the environment they've been in. They've been, ingrained with the team. And this is a hard sport. Name me a substitute driver that has got in and just won. You know what I mean? Like that just doesn't really happen. Even, Oriol Servio is a really good driver, jumped in Will Power's car at Team Penske, right? That's the best possible operation that you could get into. But without practice, without qualifying, without an opportunity to truly take advantage of that, it doesn't matter what driver you are. It's hard to jump in and succeed. So there are certain things that I'm glad that I can be that guy or I could be that guy. And, I think it certainly it gives the haters something to chew on. You're like, man, this guy, why do people keep bringing him in? Well, it's like, because they can trust that I know what I'm doing. And that's cool to know, but we obviously get into this game to win races. And so that's something that I still want to do and we have to do at this level. But yeah, being a substitute, getting to, learn from a lot of teams out there is something that I'm very, very happy that I got to do. There's a lot of incredible mechanics, incredible engineers at a lot of these race teams that I have had the opportunity to work with. Doing 3 races or 4 races for the Meyer Shank racing team was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And I don't even our best results together will never be something that, again, you're going to hang banners about. You're going to hang things in the rafters about because a lot of the strategy didn't work out for us, or a lot of the different moments here and there didn't work because you had 3 times to, show what you could do. So it's one of those things that I'm very thankful for. But again, it's not the ideal position that you want to be in as a driver.
I guess you've kind of touched on it there. You've driven for the vast majority of teams in the field, some teams that are no longer around even. So I guess what have the biggest benefits of that been, and what sort of stuff have you learned and kind of, I guess, just amalgamated together from all of those different opportunities?
I mean, that's a tough question. It's very broad. There's a lot of, there's a lot of small things here and there, but when I got into the Meyer Shank car, when Simon got hurt, that was such a shame because Simon's a champion at the highest level, Indy 500 champion. And you're like, hey, this guy is, he's one of the best to have ever done it, I think, in our sport. So, when I get in that car, though, the first thing I notice is I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never been in an Indy car that stops like this on the brakes, right? Like the brakes were something that were like, wow, how did they have this and I did not have this? You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. But those are the things that you pick up on. And again, being in a team for such a short period of time, no one's going to tell me why it's doing that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be able to find out those secrets because I am not entitled to that information. You know what I mean? Because I'm not a contracted driver there for a long period of time. But, when I go to JHR, I'm like, hey, something that I noticed at the MSR squad, which is again tied to Andretti at the time, their brakes are really good. So there's a reason why they can do this. We got to figure that out. I don't know what that is, but there is room to improve in this area. So, there's something like that that's kind of cool to pick up on. And there's a lot of experience that I have gained at different operations from a leadership perspective as well. I think leadership is so important in this series. And, you'll hear that, yeah, Penske and Ganassi, probably spend the most money and they have the most championships and wins and stuff like that. But that's because they'll do anything it takes to win. And sometimes there's teams that are not in a position financially to do that, or mentally and leadership wise. So, there's a reason why teams that are successful continue to stay successful. And hopefully, we can bring some of that. I obviously haven't got a chance to drive for Penske or Ganassi yet, but I've worked with mechanics who have been there and have seen, what makes them successful. And it's still, it's got to be a mentality. It's got to be dedication, physically, mentally from, the whole team. And I've learned a lot from a few different operations as I've been in the sport.
And I guess just looking at this last year or two specifically, I know you've obviously touched on the business side and the working hard there, but would you say it's like taken a mental toll or like, I guess just how strong have you had to be like mentality wise to obviously keep plugging away, keep going to get these opportunities and keep, I guess, getting these chances to prove yourself?
Yeah. I mean, it's been one of the hardest things in the world for sure. I mean, I'm just, at the end of the day, I have to pay my bills like everyone else. Like, I'm not like sitting on this like golden castle of like, oh yeah, if racing doesn't work out, I can just hang. That's not true. Like, I have to do this to pay my bills, to continue to establish a life for myself in the future. You know what I mean? And I also want to, I want to create a legacy for myself in the future. I want to be, I want to have my family for myself in the future as well, that I can be, that hopefully, they'll be proud of as well. So yeah, it's something that it's been really hard for me at times. There's been moments of this sport where I think it actually can be the greatest time ever. Like there's an amazing family in this sport that's a small world that you can always rely on a lot of people. But I think it's also, there's some backstabbing that can happen in this community and in this sport that is unlike any other sport, I think, out there. So that's also tough to be a part of. And it's a lethal mental grind for sure. There are some things that happen that you're like, there is no way this would happen in any other successful business, in any other sport. But racing, for some reason, brings out some of the worst in people, but also some of the best. Because it's a sport that people love. It's a sport that, you build your life around, that you build your family around. And I've met some of the best people in this sport, but I've also met some people that are like, yikes, I don't know if we want to really ever, people are never going to know some of the things that have gone on behind the scenes of some of these folks. But it's a tough game, but that's what we signed up for at the beginning.
And then sort of after all these difficult years, a reward for your patience was securing that podium in Milwaukee last year. So only a second career podium after 100 races, after what I guess has been a crazy few years for you. So what was sort of the sense of achievement? And now you've had several months to reflect on the emotions after securing that podium.
I mean, honestly, it's one of those things that at the time, I wanted to enjoy much more than what I did in 2016 for my first podium. Like, I was a rookie. I was like, shoot, all right, I'm on the podium in 4 races. Like, this is great. Like, this has got to happen way more often in my life, but it didn't. And that's one thing that I said to people at the time. I was like, hey, let's get the whole team together and we're taking a photo together, because we got to remember this moment. We got to remember these happy times. I took the whole team out to the bar the next week because we're going to celebrate. We want to enjoy the fact that it's hard to be successful in the top level of the sport. This is the most competitive racing championship, I believe, on the planet. So you got to enjoy those moments. There are obviously drivers that, have so many podiums, they don't even have enough room in their house for them. But there are also people that haven't had the opportunity to get those types of situations and those types of trophies. So it completely revitalized the love that I have for this sport. When Will Power, comes up to me after the race and is so genuinely happy for me, because I think he knows, a lot of the drivers know what I've been through, and the public will never know, certainly, what this sport is like on the inside in some areas. And I think a lot of those guys, though, have seen what I've tried to, go through and put up with. And that was a moment that I'll never forget for sure, getting the respect from Will Power on the podium, because that guy is one of the fastest to have ever driven a race car, I think, certainly with the amount of pole positions he's had and the amount of wins he's had in championships and Indy 500 win. So, that type of respect is something that I will never forget. And even Pato, who's a young guy who hasn't really been around for that long yet, but hearing him say the next week, he's like, "Hey, I watched the race again. Like, you really drove your way up there." I was like, "Thank you. I appreciate that." Yeah. Like it didn't just happen. Like, we had to go out there and create it for ourselves. So, hearing those things are things that I'll never forget, but also things that you want to just continue to repeat. Like, now it's like getting a refreshing hit of that drug of racing. You're like, "Oh, now we're back. Like, we got to get this every weekend."
And I guess that's a real full circle moment for you, because you've won Ricciardo his first championship, 14 years previously or something like that. And then you've gone on to secure his first IndyCar podium.
It's crazy how life works. It's kind of funny and ironic at the same time. But now we've got to get him his first IndyCar win. I mean, that's what I want to do. If I was to get my first IndyCar win with a team that is also getting their first win, just a great story of sport. And that's what we wanted to do together.
And I know you touched on some of like the online criticism that it just seems to happen naturally in this digital age. And obviously that success and getting them in the leaders circle as well, that will have been, I guess, sweet to respond to that. But I guess as an athlete at this level, with all the attention, how do you go about like dealing with and almost blocking out some of that online hatred that seems to just be out there, unfortunately?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's lethal out there on the internet. I mean, it's tough, and I actually, IndyCar is not quite at the level yet where it's rampant. Like NASCAR and Formula One are obviously bigger than we are, right? And we hope to continue to vault our sport into a higher level, but with that will come even more of the hatred, but also the good moments too. There are still a lot of great. Yeah, I actually think our fans and our general fan base right now is so positive and is so supportive. There are a lot of people that I have seen, tweeting at me and commenting on my stuff for like over 10 years, over 12 to 14 years, and that is super cool. And then there are a lot of young folks who have no idea who I am until like over the last 2 years. And they're like, "This guy sucks." And I'm like, "Okay, understand that, like completely get it. But maybe there's more to this than what, what the young minds might think." But yeah, I was talking to Lando Norris about it when we were playing golf, and I was like, "Dude, what you guys are getting on the internet." Like I happen to click on like a lot of fan accounts because I'm a race fan, right? And I'll just like, I like to see what the discussion's like. Cause I'm like, what are these, how did we get here? How do people get to these opinions? What's going on? And it's completely fair because sport is all about supporting your guy or girl, right? Like, hey, that's cool. But some of the F1 stuff that I see is just like, it is so psychotic that I'm like, this is kind of sad that these guys who again we're just racing drivers. You know what I mean? Now, Formula One, biggest sport in the world probably right now. So I'm not comparing myself to them at all, but they are my friends that I've got to race against through my life, a lot of those guys. And so when I was talking to them, I'm like, man, I don't know how you guys deal with this. Cause I definitely get into the comments. It's a bad area to go to, but yeah, it's part of sport right now. I think people love the interaction. Like people just, even if they say something terrible, I think they just want to get a reaction because it creates entertainment. So, it's free to do that. We're free in this world, thankfully, to be able to just throw whatever we want out at people that we either care about or don't care about. But but it's definitely hard to look at sometimes because you want to interact with people. And I'm a race fan first. Like I always say that. And I certainly have people that I support, and I know people like either will like me or not. That's cool. But man, it's a wild ride sometimes. Maybe just think like 10 seconds before we fire off that tweet that, if I had a rough day in the car, I can promise you it's a million times rougher when you then start to read like someone who doesn't actually know what happened in the car. And then the physical strain, the mental strain that you had to fight through in the car to then read, oh man, hey, it's part of the game. I get it. But yeah, sometimes it's a wild thing to have to go through, but hey, we signed up for it. Like I mentioned earlier before, we signed up for this. I'm very lucky to get to do this, and it's part of it. But sometimes it's like, yikes. Okay. All right. Let's stop.
You sort of picked up this perception in recent years of an oval expert, and I don't really know how it's come around. I just think it's you racing all the ovals pretty much. But do you sort of feel like it's important now to change that perception and sort of remind people actually you're quite decent at road and street courses rather than somebody sort of just turns up on the ovals?
Yeah, I mean, that's my whole goal for this year. I mean, that's literally it. There's a photo of me in a Formula One car hanging on my shoulder for a reason. I mean, that's the route I was going, right? I was a road course guy. I never did an oval until 2010 in my career. So, I love road and street course racing. I think road and street course racing is something that right now, the car is so, the driving style and the car are so dependent on each other. And I think as we've gone through certain eras of IndyCar, I've seen my driving style adapt to certain body kits, Aeroscreen era, right? And the Aero Kit era differently. So the Aero Kit era, when we had a ton of downforce, love that. And I think a lot of drivers love that. Alex Rossi, guys like Simon Pagenaud. I think certain drivers really responded well to higher downforce cars than the Aeroscreen car with less downforce and a different weight distribution change. So I've got to kind of go through several different eras, and without a doubt, I'm happy to admit that this car for me has been the hardest to adjust to my style. And I think you see that with a lot of drivers that maybe have won a bunch of races in the previous eras, but maybe not as much now. And then the young drivers who never got to go through that era are just easily adapting to what they have now because they don't know any different, right? So it's an interesting era of our sport. But yeah, I have for sure struggled in this era more than ever. But I think, we for sure have the ability to do it as long as we get the car into the window that I enjoy. And, there are several road course race results that I can still be proud of over the last few years. But yeah, we haven't won. Yeah, we haven't won on an oval or road course. And so we need to make it happen. And we got to get back on the podium on a road or street course for sure this year. That's the goal.
I mean, and I guess the best place to win would be Indy. And just looking at some of your
on the road course first as well. I want to win that race. I want to win the 500, obviously, but I love the Indy GP, and I would love to start off the month of May by winning that race because I've been in the Fast Six there before. Like had some really fast cars there before, but just something always happens. I was leading there my rookie year, and I'm like, here we go, and lap traffic. You're like, oh my gosh. So it's one of those things that I want to win the Indy GP actually more than any other road course.
Yeah, I mean, why not both, I guess? But obviously you've had experience of leading laps in the 500. And I don't know, have you watched back those moments where you've taken the lead and hearing just the crowd? Obviously, you as an Indiana guy, the roar of the crowd is pretty sublime when you have taken the lead.
I have, yeah. I mean, every time I see a clip like that, it definitely brings a tear to my eye. Because I love sport. I love the emotion that sport, brings out of us and brings to us. And it's cool to see, but those moments need to be capped off by longer moments of celebration and celebration out of the car where I can actually hear the fans instead of in the car. So yeah, I love the support that my hometown gives me. I love Indiana. I love the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I love everything about the folks that show up every single day for practice, that show up every day for qualifying weekend. It's just there's something about that Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the passion for it, the history behind it. It's just a beautiful thing, and I can't wait to get back there already. I mean, I'm just there's a lot of I am excited because last year it's really hard to not do the full season and just be like waiting. And the first race you do is the Indy 500. You're like, oh my gosh, I got to get a little bit lubed up in my joints first. And then thankfully I have all these races before to prepare, because you definitely are much better prepared when you're doing the full season than when you just jump in and you're like, hey, 500 miles, let's go. You haven't done anything since, in 8 months. So here you go.
You've always been particularly passionate about the growth of the series, and last couple of months we've had obviously the Fox News and the debut there. We've had Arlington being announced. We've had having talks of a new car potentially as soon as 2027. So just sort of wanted your thoughts and the direction the series is going in, and what you make of these steps, and what IndyCar could even do to make it grow further.
I mean, if I knew the answer to what we could do to grow it further, I would probably have a much higher paying job, but I do not know the answer to that. I think the mainstream advertising that Fox has done clearly made a difference for round one. Obviously a good amount of people were watching. A 45% increase over the year before. That's a big number. I mean, that's a big number for us. I would love, honestly, personally, I think we should be really greedy and be like, hey, we need at least one of these road course races to hit 2 million people. Because if we can get to that, I think that completely shifts the narrative of our sport. People actually know what's going on. They're viewing, we're weekend excitement television. We got to tune into IndyCar racing. Maybe that's after the 500. Maybe we have this great build up through the month of May. We have a great Indy 500, and maybe Detroit is our street race with 2 million people. Who knows? But yeah, I think what Fox has done, I've got more texts from people that after the Super Bowl were like, wow, hey, IndyCar seems like they're doing something. I'm like, yes, thank you. They are. Like, that's really good. And I had a couple people on my YouTube comments just recently say, hey, this is the first race I've watched since 2016. I'm like, hey, we need that. Like, we need the people who maybe drifted away from it to come right back, because there was a ton of people who used to watch open wheel racing. And so we got to get those people back. And when you see NASCAR still like at COTA getting 4.5 million people watching, why are we not getting at least 2 of those? You know what I mean? I love NASCAR racing. I think it's got such a passionate fan base, but I don't know why, if you're going to tune into that race, why can't we watch both? Or like, do you not want to watch one of them for one reason or the other? I don't know. I think that needs to be kind of looked at more, because over 4 million people watching a motor race on a Sunday in March is pretty impressive. So we got to figure out how we can get, at least to half of their numbers. And then I think we can be super pumped.
A lot of what Fox has been doing is promoting the series based on individual personalities, as we saw with the free adverts. So from a driver's perspective, how important do you think it is to sort of create this fandom around specific drivers? And that could be whether positive or negative in some ways.
Well, you got to create stars. I mean, that's for sure what's, I think, super well responded to these days. Formula One with Drive to Survive created these superstars that are Formula One drivers. And, back in the day, back when I was trying to be a Formula One driver, when Formula One came to America, all the drivers could just go to dinner wherever they wanted. No one cared. Like, no one knew who any of them were. And now they have to have security teams. They have to have escorts, like to get like security escorts to get them out of buildings. It's crazy. And so not that we need like just to be like celebrities, but we definitely need just more of an awareness that what we're doing is crazy. What we're doing is a high level sport, and what we're doing is watched by millions of people. And I think when we kind of achieve just one level above where we're at now, and, Super Bowl commercials were awesome. And the commercials in general, for Alex Palou, Pato, Joseph, very high level production. And when you look at those, you're like, hey, that's a professional sport. That's really cool. So we need more of that. And I'm curious as we go, I know Fox really wants to create some, obviously they have the Indy 500, but I think they want to create a couple more tentpole events, right? They want to have the Indy 500 and then another like must-see tune in, which may be Long Beach. Maybe it's Nashville. Maybe it's another race where they're really going to kind of draw people to maybe 2 or 3 major events. And then hopefully that spreads out to the rest of them as well.
And if there was to be a Conor Daly commercial, what would it look like? What would you want it to include?
I think it would be more so a comedy than a demonstration of coolness. So I don't know. I think it would be something more that would make people laugh. And at the end of it, they'd be like, well, how does this guy still have a job? You know what I mean? So that would, I think, be funny. But who knows? I don't think I'm going to be getting a Fox commercial until we win the Indy 500. And then after that, we'll get after it.
And I mean, you are a driver whose personality, I guess, has been displayed before some other drivers because of, your podcast, your YouTube content. I guess what inspired you to start doing all of that stuff and to create content like that?
Well, I think I just enjoy talking about racing, and I think there's an area where we don't have enough people talking about racing, you know what I mean? IndyCar racing specifically. And it's not, I also think that people want to learn more. I think people want to know more about our sport. And even if I'm sharing something that is very basic and very like level 1 racing information, that's a lot of people do not know that. A lot of people do not know this information. And when they find out, they're like, wow, this is fascinating. We did not know this about IndyCar or the car itself or the tires or the sport. So it's just fun to be able to share something that I love with people, because I do love this sport, even though it's thrown every wrench at me possible. I do love, IndyCar racing. And I think that it's, still one of the most, underrated racing series and the most underutilized sport out there. And I hope that we get to a point where we're not saying that anymore. It's like, yep, this is IndyCar racing. You guys have been missing out.
And as a podcast, we like to appeal to that next generation of IndyCar fans. So I guess if we do have people listening in here who maybe aren't as accustomed to the sport, how would you kind of describe the appeal of IndyCar if you are trying to sell the series to a new fan?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think cheering for a driver, I think, is the first thing. Find out who makes you laugh or who you think, hey, that person is a badass, you know what I mean? Or something that you can get behind, because I think it's important to support the athletes that you enjoy cheering for, but also just take a second to understand that what we're doing physically is really challenging. So the physical side of the sport, I think, is still not quite on display as much as it should be. You know, how we don't have power steering and how hot it is in the car, and just like we're going to war every race essentially. And our bodies, I mean, I still have a hole in my hand from St. Pete. I mean, but like that's just day-to-day racing. Like, that's what we got to do. We got to put our bodies on the line. We got to put everything on the line to bring home a result for our teams. And so just get into the craziness of it. Be like, hey, these guys are nuts. Like, actually. And I tune into the X Games, like, to watch people do crazy stuff that I can't do at home. And I don't encourage anyone to go out on the highway and do the speeds that we're doing, because you would probably die. But, you know, what we're doing is something that you can't do at home. And so I enjoyed tuning into the X Games to watch like Travis Pastrana doing double backflips. And I'm like, that is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And I feel like we're kind of doing stuff that is certainly similar now, especially with the speeds that we're doing at Indy. And, you know, even our road and street course racing, banging wheels at 140, 50, 60 mile an hour on the streets of Long Beach is just, it's a crazy thing. And no one gets to do that except for us. And we're very lucky to be able to do that.
So we've got our last few sort of more fun ones just to end off, as we are a podcast, like to get to know drivers quite well. So I guess what part of your personality a couple of years ago was the mullet. You've since shaved it. So any interest in ever growing that back?
I think it's dead for now. Yeah, I think the mullet's dead. It was a fun era of life. But yeah, I look back and I didn't really have a cool enough mullet. I had a mullet that you could laugh at, but it wasn't one that you could be really proud of. So I was happy. And my guy, Jason, who cut my hair, he was pumped about it, and he did a great job with it. But I don't think I was built for mullets. I was built for that era of my life with a mullet. And then now we've moved on.
We have a playlist on Spotify of songs that are chosen by the drivers we have on the podcast. So do you have 2 songs that stand out for you that you would like to add to our playlist?
Do you have any Creed on the playlist yet?
We don't, I don't believe.
Well, you definitely need Higher by Creed. That's a banger.
Cool.
People are going to give a lot of, people are not going to be happy about that, but Creed is fire. I think Creed and Nickelback should be the Carb Day shows next year. No big deal. People are going to be upset about that, but I disagree. And then my favorite song of all time is Strobe by Deadmau5. So you put that on there. That's a good one.
Cool.
Up to 20 songs now. Eventually, the game in IndyCar paddock will be guessing who put what song and trying to work out the personality. So maybe that.
I gave you quite a diverse, two very different regions.
It couldn't be more diverse than it already is.
Yeah.
We've got some country in there. We've got Back Home in Indiana. We have
Nice.
Apple by Charlie XCX. We have pretty much everything. Life is a Highway. We have everything in there. Avicii, literally everything. So no wrong answer for this playlist. Connor, that is all we've got for you. Appreciate your time as always, and looking forward to seeing what you can do rest of the season. Maybe top of the Indy 500 podium would be a fantastic way.
That's the plan. Thank you, guys.
Huge thanks to Connor for his time, and best of luck, as you said, for the rest of the season. Maybe top of the Indy 500 podium. We'll see. But quite significantly, Archie, this marks episode 100 of the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast. I know we've had a few bonuses and that sort of thing, but this is officially episode 100, so almost reaching 2 years now. But thanks to all of you who stuck along, and we finally hit the triple digits. It's quite the moment.
And it's a great way to mark it as well. A really, really fun interview with a fellow podcaster, driver on the side, no big deal. But yeah, no, thank you to everyone who has listened along, and thanks to everyone who's new as well. I know we've got quite an influx since the Will Buxton episode, which I think it must be said, we really appreciate all of the support on that, and everyone who's listened and who's come back for more after that. And hopefully we'll continue to serve you well through the season. But Dan, it has been an absolute pleasure over the last 2 years.
It has.
Here's to plenty more.
Here's to 100 more, shall we say? I mean, we've halved up from those 100 episodes, but me and you are still going strong. We've had 10 different drivers on. We've obviously had Louis Foster and Jacob Abel a couple more times. So 10 drivers on. We've had a couple more commentators on in that time. We've had some other friends of the podcast. We've had a whirlwind.
I mean, we've had a lot of off-seasoning as well. We've kind of made that our thing.
I mean, half the
got us through a
podcast
long
has
time.
been off-seasoning, hasn't it, really, in reality?
It's a good point. It's a good point.
That's the way the IndyCar schedule. But yes, I mean, all we can say is obviously a huge thank you for the support. We've seen quite a few new listeners in the last couple of weeks. So welcome along. Thanks for sticking along since the Will Buxton episode. We've got plenty more planned. We plan to have many more interviews like this. We've currently got we've had 10 different drivers on in 100 episodes. We're hit rate at the minute of 10%. So next 100, let's hope we have another 10 different drivers on. But as you said, huge thanks to Connor for his time on this one. Obviously, teammate Stingray was on a couple of weeks ago. So if you haven't listened to that, do already. We've had our St. Petersburg review with obviously Alex Palou Victorious with a couple of exclusive sound bites to listen to that as well. If you really want to do our season predictions, if you're having a bit of fun, let's see where we ranked Conor Daly in the driver standings before maybe coming back to this one, because things have changed a lot since then, shall we say. Much for the good of it. But 100 episodes down, hopefully plenty more to go. So almost coming up to 2 years. It'll be just after Alabama, we hit the 2-year mark. So that's coming up very, very soon. And me and you have been there for all 100 episodes, just about. We've been all over the world, probably been in about 7 different countries in these 100 episodes. So
yeah, that's a good point, actually. What different countries? I mean, I've probably been the least diverse of us all. I think I've done, obviously, over here in England, a couple of different locations. I've done Portugal and I've done Mallorca, the Spanish island.
I've done America. I did Australia, which was a bit of a challenge. That was a challenge. That was some weird times for me. I think it's the only other time I've done a podcast first thing in the morning, which was rather bizarre. I've done Croatia. We did National last year in Croatia. I've done Germany. I've done Hungary. I've done Turkey. I think that might be it. There might
exotic.
I've been all over the place, haven't we? So well travelled this podcast. Maybe some of the recording setups have been rather sketchy. Next week we actually don't know what's going to happen. Obviously last week we were sort of foreshadowing this one because it wasn't fully confirmed, but next week we actually have no idea. So stay tuned, because in these 100 episodes, it hasn't quite been 100 weeks, because there's been some episodes we've had 2 or 3, but we haven't missed a week in almost 2 years now. We intend for that to continue. So there will be something, because there is always something. But I think first and foremost, Obviously, Archie, thanks for joining me. Last 100 episodes. Can you believe it?
Thanks to you too. Thanks to you too once again.
So thanks for all the support over the last 100 episodes. As we said, hopefully, many more to come. Thanks for all the new fans who joined. Hopefully, you stick along across the course of the season. We love to have drivers on like we've done today. We obviously do all the race reviews. We do some of the fun stuff. You know, your Christmas specials, your predictions, and loads of different things. And all the driver market, all the news. We have a little bit of everything on this podcast. And if you do enjoy listening experience, could ever rate us 5 stars on Spotify, that'd be greatly appreciated. And share it to your IndyCar friends. Maybe they've been a long time watcher of the series, maybe they're brand new to the series. We try and cater to as many people as possible. So if you could share it, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Let's grow the podcast even more. One final thank you. It's been a lot of thank yous. Thanks to Conor for his time again to signify episode 100. But to all of you, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.